My husband had been dead for less than 6 hours when my mother-in-law locked me out of my own house. That is not grief. That is strategy. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I remember the cold first. Not the kind that bites right away, but the kind that creeps under your sleeves and settles into your spine while your brain is still too numb to react. It was after midnight. The funeral clothes were still on me. Black dress, thin coat, shoes I had kicked off in the car because my feet were blistered and swollen. I had come back to the house Daniel and I shared for 4 years, expecting silence, maybe emptiness, maybe the unbearable stillness of a home missing one person too many. Instead, I found the porch light on. Have you ever felt something was wrong before you could prove it? Before you even had words for it? The curtains were drawn, not halfway, fully. The side lamp in the living room was on, and I could see shadows moving behind the fabric. My stomach dropped before I even reached the door. I remember digging through my purse for my keys, already tired, already shaking, and not finding them. Then I remembered. I had left them in the kitchen that morning when Patricia insisted on helping, while people moved in and out of the house after we got the call about Daniel's accident. So I knocked. Once, twice, then harder. The door opened just a crack, and there she was, Patricia Vargas, 62, my husband's mother, still in her dark funeral suit, her lipstick perfect, her face dry and composed. In one hand, she held my keyring. She lifted it slightly, just enough for me to see the silver house key and the little blue charm Daniel had bought me on our 2nd anniversary. I actually felt relief for half a second. Then she said, "I changed the locks." Just like that. No build-up, no apology, no explanation. I stared at her, sure I had misheard. "What?" Her expression didn't change. "You get nothing." Nothing. Not the house, not my clothes, not my laptop, not the framed photos on the hallway table, not the folder in the desk drawer with our bank paperwork and insurance documents, not even the sweater I had left over the sofa 2 nights ago when Daniel was still alive and complaining that the heat was too high. I think I said, "Patricia, this is my home." And that was the moment something flashed in her eyes. Not sadness, not anger, certainty. "You were never meant to stay," she said. Then she shut the door in my face. I heard the deadbolt turn, then the second lock. A second later, the living room lamp went dark, then the hallway, then the kitchen. One by one, the lights inside my own house disappeared until I was standing barefoot on the porch in total darkness, staring at my own reflection in the glass panel beside the door. I didn't move. Not for 1 minute. Not for 5. I just stood there trying to understand how a funeral had turned into an eviction, how a widow became a stranger by midnight. And somewhere in that freezing silence, one question started pressing harder than all the others. How did Patricia seem so prepared? Because this didn't feel impulsive. It felt rehearsed. And weeks later, in a courtroom packed so tightly you could hear every breath, that question would finally start to get an answer. Right before the judge looked up, fixed his eyes on one line in a document, and said 4 words that changed everything. Read that again. What if I told you this didn't start the night I was locked out? What if it started months earlier, and I just didn't see it? Looking back, the signs were there. They just didn't look dangerous at the time. They looked like family tension, like personality clashes, like the kind of small, uncomfortable moments you brush off because it's easier than confronting them. My name is Elena Vargas. I'm 29, and for 4 years I believed I understood my marriage. Daniel and I weren't perfect, but we were stable. He worked long hours in construction management, early mornings, late calls, always tired but dependable. I worked from home as a freelance designer, flexible schedule, steady income, quiet days. We had routines, Friday takeout, Sunday grocery runs, arguments about dishes and thermostats, normal things. But there was always one constant tension. Patricia. From the beginning, she watched me like I didn't quite belong. Not openly hostile. No, she was more precise than that. It was in the comments. "You work from home? That must be convenient." Or, Daniel's always been generous. He gives too much sometimes. Always said with a smile. Always just subtle enough that if I reacted, I looked like the problem. Daniel would shrug it off. That's just how she is, Elena. Don't take it personally. So I didn't. At least I tried not to. But about 3 months before Daniel died, something shifted. Patricia started showing up more often. No warning, no call, just appearing. Letting herself in sometimes if the door was unlocked. Standing in the kitchen like she had every right to be there. And the questions started changing. Not casual anymore, specific. Whose name is on the house deed? Do you and Daniel have joint accounts? What happens if something unexpected occurs? I remember laughing it off once. Why are you asking that? She didn't laugh. Because life doesn't wait until you're ready, she said. At the time, it felt morbid, uncomfortable, but not alarming enough to fight over. Then there was the night I overheard them. I wasn't trying to listen. I had just come downstairs for water when I heard Patricia's voice, sharp, low, controlled. You promised me. Silence. Then Daniel's voice, quieter than I'd ever heard it. I know. I'll handle it. My stomach tightened. I stepped closer to the hallway just enough to hear Patricia again. You're running out of time. Time for what? I walked in before I could stop myself. Both of them turned. The tension vanished instantly, like someone flipped a switch. What's going on? I asked. Daniel smiled too quickly. Nothing, just work stuff. Work stuff. At 10:30 at night, with his mother. I didn't push. That's the part that still echoes in my head. I didn't push. After that, things felt off. Daniel became more distracted. More distant when certain topics came up. Money, paperwork, anything legal. And Patricia? She seemed calmer, like someone who had already secured something important. Then Daniel died, and everything moved too fast. Patricia took over the funeral arrangements within hours. She spoke to people I didn't even know existed, lawyers, insurance contacts, extended relatives. She redirected mail, answered calls on his phone, made decisions without asking me. I told myself she was grieving in her own way, that people handle loss differently. But now, standing outside that locked door, I realized something chilling. She wasn't reacting to his death. She had been preparing for it. And a few days later, when I finally managed to get access to Daniel's phone records through our shared account, I found something that made my chest tighten even more. A missed call. From Patricia, placed just hours before the accident that killed him. And when I brought everything to a lawyer, still shaking, still trying to understand what was happening, he didn't start with sympathy. He asked me one question. Did your husband ever mention a will? And in that moment, I realized I didn't actually know the answer. You think you know your own life, until someone puts it on paper and proves you don't. When the lawyer asked me about a will, I answered without hesitation. No, we never made one. I believed that, completely. Daniel and I had talked about it once casually after a friend mentioned estate planning. We agreed we'd get to it eventually. There was no urgency, no secret meetings, no late-night document signing, at least none that I knew of. So when the envelope arrived 3 days later, I wasn't prepared for what was inside. Have you ever opened something that instantly made your hands go cold? It was from Patricia's attorney, official, clean, precise. Inside was a copy of a will, Daniel's will, that dated 2 weeks before his death. I remember sitting at the edge of a borrowed bed in my friend Marissa's apartment, reading it once. Then again. Then a third time because my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. The house? Left entirely to Patricia. Savings, Patricia. Investments, Patricia. Everything, every single asset transferred to her. My name appeared only once. A single line. No provision is made for my spouse. That was it. No explanation, no reasoning, just erased. My chest tightened so hard I had to stand up just to breathe. This isn't real, I said out loud, even though no one was arguing with me, because it didn't make sense. Daniel wasn't distant like that. He wasn't cruel. And more importantly, he wasn't secretive when it came to big decisions. We talked about everything. Or at least, I thought we did. Then I looked at the signature. It was his. Or at least, it looked like it. Same name, same flow, but something about it felt wrong. Slightly stiff, like someone had copied the shape but not the motion. I took it to the lawyer immediately. He studied it longer than I expected. Quiet. Focused. Then he said something that shifted everything. This doesn't feel clean. Not proof, not yet, but doubt. And doubt was enough to keep me from collapsing completely, because if this will was real, then Daniel had chosen this, but if it wasn't, then someone else had. That's when we started digging. Emails, accounts, calendars, and buried in Daniel's schedule, something small, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. An appointment with a different attorney, scheduled for the morning after the day he died. I stared at it, my pulse starting to race. Why would he need another lawyer, I whispered, if this was already done? My attorney didn't answer right away. He just looked at me and then said quietly, because this might not have been the version he intended to leave behind. And just like that, the story I'd been told began to crack. The courtroom was quieter than I expected. No shouting, no drama, just the low shuffle of papers, the occasional cough, and the kind of silence that feels heavy, like everyone already senses something isn't right, but no one knows exactly where it will break. Patricia sat across from me. Perfect posture, neutral expression, dressed in soft gray like she was attending something routine, not a hearing that would decide everything. If you didn't know the situation, you'd think she was calm. But I watched her hands. Still. Too still. Like someone holding control by force. Have you ever seen someone who looks confident, but only as long as nothing unexpected happens? Because that's what this came down to. Something unexpected. Her lawyer went first. Clean presentation, direct claims. The will was valid, signed, witnessed, filed, everything in order. He spoke like the outcome had already been decided, and for a moment, it almost felt that way. Then my attorney stood up, and everything shifted. We'd like to introduce additional context regarding Mr. Vargas's estate planning activity prior to his passing. Context. Such a small word. But what followed wasn't small. Emails appeared first, between Daniel and another attorney. Not Patricia's attorney, a different one. The tone was clear, direct, intentional. Oh, Daniel was asking questions about updating documents, about changing provisions, about ensuring his spouse was protected. Me. The room shifted slightly, subtle but real. Then came the appointment confirmation, the one scheduled for the day after his death. The one he never made. Patricia's lawyer objected, called it irrelevant, speculative. The judge allowed it, because it established something critical. Daniel wasn't done. And if he wasn't done, then what had been filed might not reflect what he actually wanted. But suspicion isn't proof. That's when my attorney introduced the expert. Handwriting analysis, technical, detailed, almost clinical, but the conclusion cut through everything. Inconsistencies are present that suggest the signature may not have been naturally produced. Not definitive, but enough to fracture the foundation. Patricia shifted in her seat for the first time. Then came the footage. Grainy. Black and white security video from a late-night print shop. Time-stamped. 2 weeks before Daniel's death. Patricia stood at a self-service scanner, feeding documents through one at a time, adjusting, rescanning, staying far longer than someone making simple copies. The room didn't move, didn't breathe, because now the pieces were starting to align, motive, opportunity, preparation. But still, nothing that directly proved the will itself was fabricated, until the judge asked for the document. Let's review the will again, page by page, line by line, slow, deliberate. And then he stopped, his eyes fixed on a single paragraph buried near the end. A clause, one that hadn't been discussed, a one that hadn't stood out before. Read that again, the judge said. Patricia's lawyer hesitated, then read it, and this time, everyone heard it. The wording was off. Subtly but undeniably, it didn't match Daniel's previous legal language, didn't match the phrasing in the rest of the document. It was sharper, more absolute, designed to override, not clarify. The judge leaned forward slightly, and in that moment, the entire room seemed to tilt toward one question. Who really wrote that line? The answer came faster than Patricia expected, and slower than I needed. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. By the time that clause was read a second time, something had already shifted in the room, like a thread had been pulled, and everything built around it was starting to unravel. My attorney stood again. "This clause," he said, "directly contradicts both the structure and language used throughout the rest of the document, and more importantly, it overrides standard spousal protections without any supporting legal phrasing consistent with Mr. Vargas's prior records." Then he placed another document on the table. Daniel's older legal paperwork, contracts, signed agreements, even a previous draft of a simple financial authorization. The patterns were clear. Daniel's language was consistent, careful, structured. The will wasn't. And that clause? It stood out like it didn't belong, because it didn't. The judge looked back at the handwriting report, then at the footage, then at Patricia. Forensic inconsistency, contradictory intent, suspicious document handling. A pause. Then the decision, this will is invalid due to evidence of fabrication and forgery. Just like that, it was over. Or at least, the lie was. I didn't react right away. I thought I would. I thought there would be some overwhelming wave, relief, anger, something dramatic. But instead, it felt like pressure releasing slowly from my chest, like something that had been tightening for weeks finally let go. Across the room, Patricia didn't speak. For the first time since I'd known her, she had nothing to say. But consequences don't stop at a ruling. They start there. Within weeks, a formal investigation confirmed document tampering. Patricia was charged with fraud and forgery. Civil penalties stripped her of any claim to Daniel's estate. Extended family, people who had quietly supported her, began pulling away as details surfaced. The story spread. Quietly at first, then wider. Not rumors, facts. As for me, the court ordered full restoration of assets, the house included. When I finally stepped back onto that porch, it felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing it clearly for the first time. I had a new key. My key. The lock turned smoothly. No resistance. Inside, everything was exactly where it had been, frozen in time from the night I was forced out. The same lamp, the same couch, even the sweater still draped over the armrest. I walked in slowly, not rushed, not hesitant. Just steady. This house wasn't untouched. It carried everything that had happened, every conversation, every silence, every lie I didn't catch in time. But it was mine. Legally, completely, undeniably. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and this time, no one turned off the lights.